it was before the East Bay Park District bought the property, and Bob wanted it documented and photographed before any changes had taken place. It had been a private ranch for, I don't know how many years, 100 years, and at times I had to, there were cows that were rubbing up against the walls, and you know, damage was happening, and Bob just wanted it photographed and documented before any changes took place at that point. So I was just let loose in the place, and it was wonderful. It really is one of the more magical spots that I've ever photographed. This is one of my favorite caves. I call it Skull Cave. And I just went into all the caves. I photographed them. Most of the caves are done in 360-degree photographs. So you're actually looking at the back wall of the cave. So the left and right side is the back of the cave, and then it opens up as if you're looking out through the cave. And I wanted to create these scenes where if you were living in one of these caves, this is what you'd see. You'd see the whole cave, and then you'd look out the front of the cave. So a bunch of the photographs, there's 24 photographs in the show. We only have 2 images here from the show. But it was just the greatest experience. I've never seen more raptors, the owls, the walking through there, and most of the time I was all by myself. I just would let myself in. There was a caretaker, Caveman Dan, he's not here, is he? I don't think I would call him that.
He'll be here in a minute.
But he would follow, he was a little lonely, he lived out there. He would follow me around to talk. And so he didn't follow me into the caves, but when I was walking around outside, I had this shadow. In fact, in one of the photos in the show, you can see Dave Mann, Dan, shadow, because my shadow's there, and then he's right back to me. He would follow me around like a shadow because he was lonely and wanted to talk. But except for the time with Dan, it was just such a magical experience to be walking around, the wind. You know, these caves are formed by wind and rain blowing through, so you'd be in a cave and some of them would go through and you'd hear, you know, whispering voices and stuff. I'm sure it was just the wind, but oh my God, it was kind of a creepy and cool, and it was just so neat to be out there by myself, walking around, and getting a chance to photograph this beautiful area. So I did most of the caves, did them all in 360. You'll see a bunch of them over in the show. And then I tried to create just, you know, what they document in an artistic way, what the place looked like. All the rock formations, the lichen, the little pools that Bob and I saw fairy shrimp in that one heavy winter, I think in 95 or 6. It was just a great experience. And I've never shown these photographs before. These 24 photographs in the gallery that haven't been shown at all. So it's all kind of new work for me to be putting out there, and I just think it's an incredible place. And if people get a chance, the East Bay Park does tours. I'm sure Bob's going to mention it. I don't think they let you in the caves. All right, I don't think you get to go in the caves, but you could look at my photographs of the caves. And I picked out my favorite cave, the cave that I would want to live in. And there's a buckeye growing right out of the mouth, and it's right next to one of the few pink buckeyes I've ever seen. And then right at the face of the cave is this big buckeye growing out, and in the spring it was incredible. Just the whole cave entrance was covered in buckeye leaves with light filtering in. It was gorgeous, great place. So that's all I have to say, really. Just it's an amazing place to be, and been really lucky. Thanks to Bob, he got me out there, and I documented it, and you'll see it in photographs. So that's that.
So thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about a very special place. And I think it's important to kind of have a little imagination. And first of all, you don't have to imagine that there's just a really long legacy in America of artists and photographers being the eyes of people who can't go somewhere. Starting with Yosemite and the painters out the west, it really is a very special thing that has really enabled conservation to happen in places where people really didn't know about it. And Stephen is one of those kind of people that really can tell the story of a place through photography. there's a lot more to this desert-like, windswept place than caves. And so I wanted to give you a sense of its story, its narrative about an interesting struggle, frankly. It is really amazing that this place wasn't destroyed, frankly. And I want to take the time and your time to talk a little bit about that, because the reason why I had the opportunity through the Park District to have Stephen photo document this, there was a very big struggle to get this site preserved. And I will talk about CCWD, who was a partner and really was the agency that went to court to buy the first core section of this property. And so I think it's important to do that. But before I do that, a little bit of imagination. Think about California 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, maybe even short as 300 years ago, which most of our species now started doing that with grazing animals, started to evolve. On the eastern side of Vasco Caves out in San Joaquin Valley, the skies would be black in the winter from migrating waterfowl. It was a sea of grass, just like the Delta. But San Joaquin River, which now even runs backwards sometimes because there's no water, about 150 dams were built in Sierra Nevada. Most of all the southern Sierra Nevada and southern San Joaquin Valley drains out through the San Joaquin, originally out through Niles Canyon, but then went through the Carquinez Strait and out to the bay. So you have this delta. It was a massive area of wildlife wetlands and a sea of grass. So you have that as one backdrop. You have this river system that was untamed, flowing and changing, not keeping course, but spreading in a lot of different fingers from Fresno all the way to here. So you have a really great wetland place. There were huge herds of tule elk and pronghorn in the valley. The antelope migrations grazed the grasslands. And windblown sand created sand dunes that went from Byron in Alameda County, Contra Costa County, all the way to Antioch. And only about 30, 40 acres of those dunes are left. And there were white sand dunes all along eastern Contra Costa from the river flows in the wind, in the sand. Pretty remarkable. In the middle of this huge grassland, the Diablo Range, stretching 150 miles south from Mount Diablo, formed that other sloping ridge up towards San Francisco Bay. So you had this amazing wetland water system, this ecosystem of rivers and fresh water. And then you had the hills, and then you had the bay, full of natural resources. Condors and golden eagles were flying all over this area. It's right in the wind pattern. We'll talk a little bit about wind and wind turbines as part of this. So it really is a remarkable environment. In the middle of this is a very tiny desert-like oasis called Vasco Caves. It's surrounded by grasslands, thousands and thousands of acres of grassland until you get into the foothills of Morgan Territory and Mount Diablo. It's a very small area, but this incredible place is featured in a way that it became, if you think of Highway 24 and 680, that's what it was for Native American tribes. 4 different distinct tribes with 4 distinct languages came together there and crossed paths. They traded, they hunted, they were seasonal, some lived there. There was a big population of Native Americans in Morgan Territory, where Los Vaqueros Reservoir is, and the valley there, in Round Valley, and over to Vasco Caves. So historically and culturally, this is a very sacred place to Indians where they actually met. You found obsidian flint chips in some of the caves, which aren't a geologic feature in this area. And later on, you actually found Spanish cavalry bullets in these caves. So when they started looking at this, they discovered a real lot. So it really is significant to Native Americans. As the Native populations were forced out, were sickened, were murdered by the early onslaught of our California history, and particularly the gold rush. Farming populations came in, and it really became a sheep and cattle area, sheep first. In fact, a lot of the caves were used for the baby sheep like little barns to keep them safe from coyotes and other things like that. So the ranchers protected this for over 100 years. And it was the middle of nowhere, very isolated, hard to find. But what's interesting as part of that early history is in 1982 there was a proposal that you probably all remember called the Peripheral Canal. And the Peripheral Canal not only was going to plumb the delta, and you know that would never happen again, okay, say that. But it had two major reservoirs in the southern part of the delta. One was Los Vaqueros, and there was an additional Forebay in front of that. And the state sent out a team of biologists, and this was about 1982, and I got invited, because I was doing land acquisitions for the Park District, I got invited to go on some of these field trips. I was like a kid in a candy store. I'm going on all this private property, and I get to snoop around and see things I've never seen before. And what the biologists discovered was remarkable. Not only Native American and cultural history, but it was pretty much untouched. The ranchers, the sheep herders had pretty much left it alone. People in eastern Contra Costa referred to it as the Caves of Vasco, and they would have picnics in the caves, but family-oriented, just a few families had that access. So what was incredible in this discovery was not only the cultural diversity, but the biological diversity. Rare and endangered species, Stephen spoke about the fairy shrimp, but there's 3 species of fairy shrimp, 2 of which are listed endangered species, live in these pools, which dry out every year when it rains again. The eggs hatch, and they're there again. Then they're gone. It's incredibly a rare thing. There are plant and animals that don't belong there. We have a palmer oak that belongs in Southern California, grows on a hilltop, nowhere around here. Clearly, it got brought by some of this trading. But why palmer oaks? Crummy little acorn, not much worth eating. But it's the only place around here on top of the snow. And when you're there looking at it, I think some of the pictures that Steve may have in the show, it looks like a toupee on top of a hill. What was that? And so you have these grinding bowls. You have what's called tenayas, or bowls carved out by the wind. You've got iron concretions, look like giant bowling balls that are falling out, and it's just all windswept. So the biologists from California said, this is so remarkable. We think if they build this water system out there, that the mitigation should be a 40,000 acre Tule elk preserve that would encompass all of these areas. And I think I can start to do this. So I'll give you a little geography. So the area, this is Los Vaqueros Reservoir, this is Vasco, the caves are here, Brushy Peak is down here, Morgan Territory, Round Valley. So they had studied this entire area, because basically the peripheral canal, and then it would be pumped into here, close to what the Water District did, but not nearly as big a project. And so they were proposing a 40,000 acre permanent wildlife preserve out there. But guess what? The voters decided they didn't like this idea much, and they defeated the peripheral canal. Bang! All the studies left alone, forgotten about to some degree. And so it went back to the ranchers doing their thing, and no acquisition of any kind was on the docket. In 1986, wind turbines started popping up in the Altamont. Energy crisis, wind energy, clean energy. And literally there was a proposal on the core area of this preserve of 106 wind turbines, some of which were literally on top of the caves. The county was not going to do even an environmental impact report for this project. And a small, unnamed group of environmentalists went out and lobbied the county and the Park District and the Sierra Club to get the county to do an environmental impact report, because they knew about the importance of this site, but nobody was talking about it. Imagine, this unique site was going to have 106 wind turbines all over the top of this area. Well, some of the wind turbines got developed adjacent to this, but it delayed this project because the county said they've got to do some mitigation, and the property owners argued about it. And so that kind of was a timeout for that wind turbine project. Others were built all around it. And so that construction of the turbines never happened on the core area of the caves where Steve's taken all the pictures. In 1988, the Contra Costa Water District decided that they would go alone and provide permanent water to blend from the delta to get better water quality and emergency storage. And they go without the state, not build a Purple Canal, but just do their own smaller project in the same area. The state had done all the studies. They knew they could build a dam there. It was feasible. So the public supported that and voted a $450 million construction project for the Los Vaqueros Reservoir. Part of that project was there was a highway running through the middle of where that dam was going to be, so they had to relocate the road, and the proposal was to put it east of the Los Vaqueros Valley, which also was very full of Native American sites, and the Water District was very careful about how they treated that. So as a part of that, the regulatory agencies, the environmental groups, even the Park District, was very concerned about bringing this new highway so close to where today, if you go the new Vasco Road, you're looking right at the rock outcrops when you come over from Alameda and drop down, or vice versa, and you can see the rock outcrops. So there was a lot of concern from the Native American community, from the State Office of Historic Preservation, from a lot of people, that all of a sudden vehicles could get off of that road, people could get off the road, get into that site and damage it. And in fact, somebody got into the site and carved on what's called polychromatic pictographs. We don't have any. We have pictographs. These are multicolored, painted, not carved, but painted rocks. Incredibly rare, incredibly sacred to these, to the Native American peoples. So that really caused an uproar, and the Water District went ahead and said, we've got to do something about this, we're under pressure. And so the Water District moved forward to take two property owners who own the core area to court and acquire this property, because the property owners weren't willing to do that. They still wanted to build the wind turbine projects and weren't willing to do that. The East Bay Regional Park District said, well, if you're going to do that, we will give you $800,000 of funding to help you buy that. And so we ended up having a challenging partnership, but a partnership nonetheless that got the job done. This was a really difficult and expensive court case. The property owners were well represented, and they did not want, they weren't against selling it. They wanted the price as if the wind turbines got built already, which wasn't the case. So it was controversial, and we were able to get it acquired. And what we did was agreed, and this was a condition of the Water District permits, that we would provide on-site security permanently, and we would only open it up by a staff-led or naturalist-led tour. Which leads us again to why photographs are so important, because we're not allowed to just let anybody go in there, because really the fragile nature, particularly of the polychromatic pictographs. So you can only go in by reservation, and it's very restricted. And part of that is to respect the Native American community, but also because it was a permit requirement. So it's a little different than most of your regional parks. It's very restricted, so enjoy those pictures. So in 2007, Contra Costa County also established a habitat conservation plan to expedite permitting in areas that contain endangered species and important habitat in eastern Contra Costa County. And that was the first habitat conservation plan really in the nation of this order of magnitude. And since the original core properties were acquired by the Water District and the Park District, today you're looking at a preserve that has had $12 million of state, federal, and your East Bay Regional Park District WW money. and has acquired 4,000 additional acres surrounding the original about 600 acres of the preserve. So pretty remarkable. But I think it's really important to understand is like, well, this is really neat. These are neat pictures. This is a special place. But it came so close so many times, being the middle of nowhere to being the center of state legislation for dams, for a local dam, for highways, for wind turbines. And what we got because of really a pretty amazing effort and a very challenging effort is almost 2 decades of effort to preserve this site. So it is really remarkable, and I hope you appreciate it when you see these pictures. I was privileged to hire Stephen and romp around with him a lot out there. It really is a beautiful landscape. Every season changes. But I've never, being a native Contra Costan, I've never seen a site so small with so much unique, individualized beauty. Every little turn is a different view, and you see that, and Stephen has really brought that out. So today, the preserve, this shows all the expansions out there and kind of where it's located. So the old highway was through the middle of Los Vaqueros Reservoir, and that goes right through this area. The Native American, first Americans, first Californians here, looked at the entire area as pretty sacred. You have the Byron Hot Springs out here, which was an important part. Mount Diablo was considered the center of creation of the universe by some of the tribes. And you have the Vasco Caves. So the first piece is this green piece here, and since that time, even with the road, we have expanded this really large grassland buffer. And it's further buffered because all of this area here is water district, watershed land, but doesn't have a reservoir in it, so it's an additional buffer. So you're really talking about a preserved area here that's probably close to 10,000 acres, not 4,000. So it really is quite a story, quite a saga. And it's full of wildlife, and it's full of history, it's full of culture, and it's full of beauty. And I hope you really enjoy Stephen's pictures. And I'm really proud to have had a role in this. This was one of the special projects we got to do. We said, nobody's going to see it. How do we talk about it and get people interested in it? And Stephen told you today, I haven't done a show like this before, because I wouldn't let him. This was a very sensitive issue. In the middle of kind of this battle, a publication came out that actually showed pictures of the pictographs. And the Native American representatives got really upset at both CCWD and the Park District because somehow we were supposed to control everything. And so there was a lot of concern. So we really clamped down on that. And the issue of the vandalism, there actually is one of the pictographs with a date on it that somebody scratched into when they went there. And the pictographs, which aren't in the show, there are pictures of condors, pictures of eagles, pictures of snakes, some other very special sacred symbols for some of the tribes. So it's a very special place. I hope you enjoy the picture, and thank you for supporting your parks. That's where your money goes, is to do things like this. But it really has been a pleasure for me to see it expand much more than what I thought. I thought it was going to be about the remaining last piece, core 500 acres. And it's just blossomed into this huge grassland preserve. There are badger, there are golden eagles, there are all kinds of animals out there that are really untouched. It's a little like the Serengeti without the lions. I'm sure it's mountain lions. We know they're mountain lions. Because it's a big rolling grassland, and it's very different than what you see around here. Pretty bare. So I think we're open for questions now. Sure. Thank you. I didn't call on you. I was doing a Trump, sorry.
What is the public able to see then?
Pardon me?
What is the public able to see of that preserve?
They are actually going into the core rock complex. They go into the site, they take a band shuttle, and they hike with a naturalist around to several, including one site with the pictographs. You do get to see what we call it was called by an archaeologist once the B-52s, not the band. but because they look like airplanes, and they're probably condors and eagles. And they're pretty hard to see because they're very old. But you go around the different areas and you get to see these big rock outcrops in some of the caves.
And this is on the website?
The tours are on the website, and they're also in what we call the RIN, Regional in Nature, comes out quarterly in all of your newspapers, and it offers that. The reservations happen through the Black Diamond Interpretive Center, and also sometimes with the Big Break Visitor Center in Oakley. So the naturalists lead those tours. So, question in the back.
Yes, I'm not familiar with the area. Could you indicate
Sure.
where the windmills are with respect
Sure.
to the Vasco Caves?
Love to do that. So this is the Alameda County line. This is Livermore Valley. This is what's called Brushy Peak, another beautiful preserve of the East Bay Regional Park District. And the Altamont Pass, this is 580 here. The Altamont Pass is here, and that's where the Alameda County has about 5,000 wind turbines. Contra Costa only has about 300. And they're actually taking those down now and replacing them with taller but less impacting to birds. And so we're really pro removing the old ones, putting the new ones in. In some places they're taking down 40 and putting up 3. They're just bigger, and they have about a 60% reduction in bird mortality, which is really important. So we're trying to work with the wind industry. So this is what's called the Clifton Court Forebay in the Delta. It's where all your water comes out of the Delta and gets shipped through the State Water Project to our good friends in Southern California. So this is where the water reservoir is, Los Vaqueros. So this is the Delta. This would be Brentwood, and then Oakley and Antioch up here, Pittsburgh. And so you're into Mount Diablo, top right here. So this is Mount Diablo, so it's the eastern side of Mount Diablo. This is what the HCP covers, and we've been able to take money from that to help buy a lot of these sites. It's been tremendous expansions of open space and preserves from the Habitat Conservation Plan and the WW measure. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Jim?
You mentioned that there was tribes of Native Americans that lived at Vasco Caves. Was that the Ohlonies or who?
There were four tribal groups, and they were a mix. So you had the Ohlonies, which are more to the Bay Miwok. You had, I actually have the names here, the Volvone, which were a Bay Miwok speaking tribe. You have the Tamkin, Delta Yokuts, the Chovan, another Delta, a lot of Delta groups, and the Sassoni. I probably am saying that wrong, right, Beverly? I see you on tape. So it was a mix of groups. There are no middens or burials that we've found at the caves, so that meant it was probably seasonal hunting and sacred religious practices there. But where the dam is at Los Vaqueros, I think they unearthed close to 100 burials, somewhere like that. So that was a resident. In Round Valley, and next to Round Valley, there are 1,500 grinding bowls. Wow. I mean, you're talking about sizable villages. Morgan Territory up on top of the rock, the ridge in the regional park also had significant village up there. Clayton had a significant village right where you drive through Clayton. So there were a lot of resident populations, but we have not seen any permanent population located at Vasco. So it's probably just a special site. And think about, why. First of all, they're caves. You can get out of the wind, get out of the rain. You could sit in there. There's grinding bowls in the cave, so obviously family groups were sitting in the caves collecting acorns and doing grinding right there on site. A lot of animal species there to hunt. So it's both shelter and food, but it doesn't appear that there were any permanent villages in that site. They were in the valleys, to the most part, except for Morgan's up on top of a ridge, and that was a big village site as well. So.
Jim stole my question.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
The progress report on the HCP connects to that and is pretty expansive.
Yeah, this is, so everything in yellow in this picture are joint projects between the East Bay Regional Park District and the Habitat Conservancy, which is the HCP. And you are getting, my board of directors loves to say this, and then they expect it for everything. For every dollar, we're getting $10. So that's right. We're paying 10% of the acquisitions, and the state and federal agencies, which is the Fish and Wildlife Service on the federal government and the State Fish and Wildlife on the state side, are funding partners in that. And we don't know how long that will last, but the recession we probably have bought twice as much as we expected because of the recession, motivated sellers, low real estate market, and this money coming in the door right at that time. So it really is we love to take credit for everything we do, but it was a big stroke of luck. And some people don't see it as luck because the recession was pretty terrible. But for acquisition, it was pretty robust. Question?
Earlier, did you say that the East Bay Regional Parks is the biggest park system in the nation?
It's the biggest regional park agency in the universe. Yes, that's true. We're assuming there aren't any out there, but it is the biggest in the United States. And there aren't any in other countries. It's a pretty unique thing. In 1934, created by the legislature, 80 years, and we're, again, visionaries that created this little park district. It kind of was the little engine that could and just kept going. Pretty wonderful that the public has supported us so much.
Who was the moving force behind that?
The moving force behind the park district was really centered out of UC Berkeley professors who loved the hike. Actually, Robert Sproul, who was in charge, he was a professor who was in charge. The Sierra Club leadership was there, and it really kind of was a mountain climbing group associated with that. But labor was there from Oakland. Labor leaders were involved, but it was a small group of people who spent $1,000 to hire Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. to make a plan. And Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. said, "This isn't worth my time, it's too small." And a professor working for the National Park Service at UC Berkeley, Ansel Hall, said, "This is a pretty special area. I'll do the plan with you if you'll put your signature on the plan." And so Ansel Hall, I think Jerry Kent is here today, one of our great volunteer historians. I think Jerry and I pretty feel that Ansel Hall was really pretty important to the beginning of the park district. And he was the first naturalist in Sequoia, then Yosemite. And he got moved during the Depression to UC Berkeley. He was a UC Berkeley forestry graduate. And so he was another force to be reckoned with. And it was a very small plant. It was created to buy East Bay Municipal Utility District surplus land that they were going to sell for development. And these incredible small group of people, which I call them the crazy wizards,